There was a time when the thought of repairing a hole in the wall, much less replacing an entire room of sheetrock, was way too intimidating to me. There was no way that I was going to be able to do it until I did. And now that I have done several projects involving fixing some sheetrock, I thought that I would share all of the information that you need to know on how to tackle that sheetrock project that you might have been putting off for some time. So follow along if you want to learn how to repair or replace your drywall. So I thought that this would be like a great example for me to be able to show you how to replace sheetrock and at the same time repair these small little holes that I need to repair because it needs to get done. Here, for example, we don't have anything in the back to be able to get the sheetrock to hold on to. So what you want to do in this instance like this is take a spare piece of wood. I'm using a, what is this, a 1x4, 1x3, an actual 2x4, doesn't matter. You just want it long enough to be able to grab onto this sheetrock, and then when you put your sheetrock back on, that you have the sheetrock something to hold on to. For this part specifically, I have the original sheetrock. If I didn't have the original sheetrock, then obviously I just cut a new piece to size. It fits in there perfectly. It's super easy to cut. You pretty much just take your measurements, transfer your measurements over to the sheetrock, measure, and then in order to cut it, all you have to do is score it and snap them around to the opposite side where the paper is, and then you score on the opposite side to cut through it completely, and then you have your piece of sheetrock that you need. Now the next step to do once you have all of your sheetrock up is to add your joint compound, your tape and floating, if you will. I'm not an expert by any means. This is just personal experience and what's worked for me in the past. I do it just enough to get by to where I'm able to add texture and it blends in fine. You don't see the seams. In order to do the joint compound, you need a joint knife, and there are different sizes of these. I usually start with this 6-inch. I feel like it's a perfect size for the first round, and then after that I'll do my second coat with the same 6-inch, and then after the 6-inch then I'll move up to a larger one. And the reason you move up in sizes is because you want to cover first obviously the actual seam when you add your tape, and then you want to get a wider so that it helps to blend in that seam so that you can kind of dissolve it and get thinner around the edges as you get wider. These are also sewed in different sizes, obviously to match your knife. I don't know what the biggest size of these are or what traditionally most people use. The biggest I ever go is 12-inch, I believe. There are different joint compounds that you can use. I'm gonna be using what's called an Easy Sand 90, which they come either dry or in a ready mixed tub. It's already mixed for you, or you can buy it dry in a powder form where you can just mix as much as you need at a time and just add water to it. The green one is the one that takes the longest to dry, which has the longest working time. So for someone who's inexperienced with joint compound and doing tape and floating, I would suggest staying away from the shorter or the smaller numbers and working with something that has a higher drying time, so that way it gives you a longer working time. The number on the back refers to usually the minutes that you have for the working time. So you have a 90-minute working time window. Once you mix it, that working time has already started because there's something in the powder when it's mixed with the water that activates. You do need your tape, and this is what you use for all of your seams. Now they do sell different types of this. They do sell mesh kind, and then they sell this paper kind. I personally really like the tape. I feel like it's easier to work with for beginners. This is obviously personal preference. What I'll do is I'll take a piece of tape and I'll kind of guesstimate how long I need it to be, and I'll cut it, but I'll actually leave just a little bit of a space. I'll take some on my knife and I'll apply it with most of the pressure directed towards the seam. and then do the same thing from the top. Now, if this was a bigger wall that I was fixing, or if it was like brand new sheetrock that I was fixing, and I had a bunch of screw holes I needed to cover, that would be the first thing that I would do. And then I would come in and cover my seams. But since I don't have very many holes to cover, then I'll just leave it. And then what you want to do is you want to place your tape, you want to hold one end, and you just want to press that tape so that you take out all of that extra joint compound and just smooth it out. Now, if my tape was too long, then I could easily just place my knife there, lift, take my paper, and literally pull it, and it'll cut right where you were holding it there. I'm just going to do the same thing this side. Once all of my tapes are done, then I'll go in with more, and I'll do the same concept where I'll cover that seam. In this case now it's just the tape, and apply most of the pressure towards the bottom to where I'm leaving most of the product on the tape towards the center. Tape and floating is really in the pressure or how you use your actual knife than the actual application. Direct all of your pressure towards the bottom so that you have almost no difference from your wall to your compound. How you direct that pressure is how your wall is going to end up looking. It's the next day, and this should be completely dry. We should be ready to go ahead and start the next process before we can do our second coat. No matter how good your application is, sanding is super important when it comes to taping and floating. Even if you're going to add texture, you do want a smooth transition between any two seams. So smooth enough should be your goal if you're adding texture, and very smooth should be your goal if you are opting to not add any texture. Sanding can be very intimidating. I know I was very intimidated with the sanding part with taping and floating. Something that I've recently discovered is sanding with a little bit of help, especially with bigger projects. Like if I was to be doing, which I eventually will be, this entire wall on this garage to replace all of the sheetrock, it's going to be a lot of elbow grease to sit there and manually sand all of it, whether it's with one of those manual pole type things, or if you're just doing it with a block and sitting there sanding, that's gonna be a lot of sanding. But we won't have that issue, which brings me to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Inokraft. Now, having something like this for a huge project or a larger project is such a game changer. Inokraft's drywall sander is super cool because, as you can see, it moves in several different ways to allow you to be able to reach into a little bit harder to reach areas. It's also flexible enough that you're able to do the ceiling, do walls perfectly fine. And even if, because I know that sometimes machines like this can get kind of heavy if you're doing this kind of motion, even if the machine is doing all of the work for you, holding it can sometimes kind of get heavy after a while. And so what's really cool about this one is that it actually comes with a strap that you can actually strap onto you if it does end up being a little bit too heavy for you. It also comes with an attachment for your hose. It comes with a bag in order to collect all of that extra dust. It's obviously still recommended to add some kind of protection in order to avoid breathing in all of the dust, because there is obviously still going to be some dust. Now, this also comes with adapters for your shop vac if you have one, so that you can directly attach it to that, and that will gather even more or collect even more dust because it can suction a lot of that for you as well. If it is in the budget for you, I would definitely 100% recommend using a drywall sander. Something like this Inokraft is super affordable. It's gonna save you not only a lot of time, but it's gonna save you a lot of effort from having to sand manually. Because again, you don't ever wanna skip having to sand, because no matter how smooth your application is, sanding just ensures that everything is going to be completely smooth and flawless. And you're going to see how easy it is to just go ahead and sand this and literally be done within a couple of minutes, instead of sitting there for a much larger amount of time trying to get all of these edges smooth. And obviously there's texture on this wall already, so the perimeter of this is not going to be smooth, obviously, but I still want a smooth transition. I'm going to go ahead and connect this, and then we can go ahead and start sanding this, and then I'll show you how easy this is. And look how bright this is. This is super bright, provides so much light for you to be able to see how good of a job you're doing or how bad of a job you're doing. It also comes with different sanding discs. The higher the number, the lower the grit. The smaller the number, the higher the grit. Does that make sense? I actually have popcorn ceilings in my garage, which I'll show you here in a minute. And I'm gonna show you how easy this actually removes it using the 80 grit. This, you're literally just letting the machine work, and you're literally guiding it to where you want it to work without putting in all that extra effort. Let's go ahead and start sanding this. So to add your sanding disc, you literally just place it on there. It's got that Velcro backing to it, so it goes on there super smooth, and it has a nice cushion that it's like super soft. This Inokraft drywall sander has a 820 watt motor and variable speeds from 600 to 1900 RPMs, which is no surprise that it's actually working through this as quickly as it is. And this is actually real time, it's not sped up. Many of the design points are friendly to novices, such as all DIY homeowners, whether seasoned or new. Upgrade your DIY game with Inokraft Drywall Sander Kit. Its comprehensive accessories and detailed manual help DIYers quickly learn and get started. Inokraft offers support to assist with any product issues should you have any. Be sure to check out Inokraft's drywall sander using the link down in the description so you can make your next drywall project a lot easier. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and start adding the second coat. I went ahead and finished that second coat, and I went ahead and sanded the exact same way that I already showed you how to sand using the Inokraft drywall sander. At this point, I'm ready to either do an additional coat if I feel like it didn't cover enough and there's still not a thick enough layer to cover all of the seams. I feel like this is perfect and it doesn't need an additional one. As far as texture, you could add texture using a hopper gun, or you could also use texture in a can if you're not comfortable using a hopper gun. But for something like this, that's just a small patch repair job, I wouldn't use the hopper gun. I would just go ahead and use the texture in a can because it's just easier. Then you just wait for that to dry and you're done. And as you can see, it didn't take very long. I think what takes the longest is waiting in between coats and waiting for things to dry, as opposed to the actual working time that you take to do the actual job. So just keep that in mind. I hope that you found today's video helpful. I hope that you were able to learn something or gather the courage enough to be able to tackle your next drywall repair. If you've been putting it off, or if you ever come across having to repair a hole in your wall. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoy DIY content. I love y'all. Be kind, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.